Welcome to the next episode, this episode of the interviews with Richard Windmann. It's a part of the SCSA podcast network. Our two guests that we're having on today is very, very special to me. It's Paul and Chris Ciaccia from the Angry Catholic Show. I've had the honor and the privilege of being on their show for, I don't know, like 4 or 5 times. And so I kind of feel shameful that I never invited them to our show. And so today, here we are. And I just wanted to say what a pleasure it is to have you guys and our close association. I think that we have the same mission of awareness and everything about the Catholic Church. And just spoiler alert, most of this is going to be about the Catholic Church. You've heard in other interviews that I've done about the Catholic Church in New Orleans. But Paul and Chris are from Pennsylvania, another battleground state for childhood sex abuse in the Catholic Church. And so I guess let's start off with this. Introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about you. What was the impetus or the catalyst for the Angry Catholic Show? How did it come to be?
You want to start, or you want me to start?
You take the lead, Paul.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having us on, and we are very appreciative that we've been able to get to know you over the last several years, and you've been very instrumental in helping us get a better understanding of the reality of what was going on. Because when we decided to throw our hat in the ring, we thought we knew a little bit, but we really didn't. We had no idea what was really going on. And the impetus for the show and how it got started was really our children had been put in harm's way back in
2013.
Well, 13, he was arrested, but the kids were put in harm's way.
Like 2010, 2011.
Yes. So in that time frame, they were put in harm's way. The priest that my older sons had served for gets arrested in a car with a 15-year-old boy. We chalk it up to one-time thing. Even though we were very disturbed, we're like, okay, this happens. We move forward. And then the Pennsylvania grand jury came out, 2018, Summer of Shame. The McCarrick revelations came out. We start going, what? And we start looking into it. And I guess the kicker for me that did it, even though it should have happened years before, was Kristen was doing a little research into one of the legal cases, one of the big notorious cases that happened in the Diocese of Scranton, the Father Al Liberatore case, which cost the diocese millions. And Kristen turned to me and said, no, you have to read this court case. And so I did, and reading the court case and seeing the names of the people that were involved in the court case, and then realizing, wait a minute, this guy's our vicar general now. This guy's in a position of power in the diocese. This guy's our bishop. Oh, this guy's a Monsignor that's very well known and respected in the diocese. He got fined by the court for lying to them. Instrumental in helping us get a better understanding. So that was really the impetus on my end, that it was, what do you do at that point? So we decided we had we have an amazing small group of supporters behind the scenes that allows us to do what we do. They've been wonderful. They allowed us to purchase everything that we have pretty much in the studio. We all put in money to be able to do that. And so that really was that was the 2x4 across the face, that lawsuit, reading that case. And I recommend go on and Chris, how do they find that? They
can just search. Google Al Liberatore, Diocese of Scranton, and the court case will pop up. And it's a lot hasn't come out. I mean, the Diocese of Scranton settled after 2 days in court for $3 million because they didn't want any more coming out. But what did come out was absolutely ridiculous and shocking. Yeah. And that was kind of the impetus, I think, for starting this journey, with this Angry Catholic show. But one of the things in 2018, when the McCarrick revelations came out and the Pennsylvania grand jury report came out, we went to church like we do every Sunday and a lot of times during the week. And we have our family there. We happened to be just sitting in the second row this time. Normally we're towards the back, but my husband put us up front for some reason. And all of a sudden we look and it's a videotape that we're going to have to watch or a DVD of our Bishop Joseph Bambera in the Diocese of Scranton. And he was going to address the revelations. And I had just read the Al Liberatore report at court case, as had Paul. I had read through the whole entire grand jury report. I had combed everything I could to learn more and more about this McCarrick case and those revelations. So I knew some stuff, not that I didn't have insider knowledge. It's all out there public if you look, but I had researched, and as had my husband, and we knew what just publicly what our bishop already knew and how he had been involved and how he had enabled and shown poor judgment and didn't seem to be bothered by, people getting harassed by a director of vocations in the seminary. So the bishop, we listened to the DVD, they go to put it in and we're looking at each other. And I'm like, you know what? If he starts to lie, I'm getting up. I do not have to sit as a faithful Catholic in a church and be lied to by my bishop. Like, that's not part of my obligation as a Catholic, and that's not holiness. So Paul said, okay, let's just sit. Let's see what he has to say. So, this is August. They put the DVD in and we get to hear, I know many of you are angry. I'm angry too. I'm disappointed too. And I'm thinking, I'm surprised too. I'm like, how can you be surprised? You're one of the players, So my husband and I look at our children and we get up and we walk out with 5 children in tow at the time, right? The 2 older ones weren't there, but all 5 of the other kids are with us, and all 5 of us and my husband, we walk out and we won't listen to this. And then when it was finally over, we walked back in and took our place and continued with mass. And I remember thinking, as we're standing with our kids in the vestibule, waiting for, the lie fest to be over, like, I was so upset. Of course, I'm being lied to, so that's upsetting. I'm being played, or he thinks he can play all of us. That's upsetting. But I'm looking at my kids and these families, and I'm thinking, like, they're trying to brush this under the carpet, like, nothing to see here, folks. We've moved ahead. Get your virtues training done. And I'm thinking, we're going to lose a generation of kids. Like, we're going to just lose them. They're not going to go to mass. They're not going to practice their faith. They're going to be gone, a whole generation, and then their children's children. So I think that was one of the impetuses too, is to, like, we have to talk about this. Like, this has to be brought out into the open. And I think what I've realized over time I think it's so important what your organization is doing is we need to hear the stories. We need to really hear what happened. We need to just be able to listen. And as bad as it can be, and because I think to not listen to the stories of survivors and not to hear what they've gone through and how they feel, and to just have like an open forum where you can listen to that. I'm not even sure that's a Christian thing, right? If you're not going to listen to someone who got hurt. So I think that's an important part of actually being a Christian at this point is not just facing this, not just getting the message out, but actually listening to the people who've been hurt.
And that's what I really appreciate about your show is that you have many, many survivors on your show, and you allow them to tell their story. Just a little bit more background on your show. How many episodes have y'all done?
It on the website and on like the web the podcast, all the platforms, it's right under 200. I think it's like 197 or something, but that's some that have been replayed. I've remastered some from old, and we've cut, because there's so much information that we've gone over in the last 3.5 years.
Yeah.
That I keep hearing from different people that, find a way to get that information back out. So little, but it takes, Richard, it takes hours and hours and hours to go back and edit a show.
Yes, it does.
Especially one that's like an hour long. But if I had to guess, I would say 150, 155, 60 new content shows that we've actually produced, something like that.
Wow, and that's incredible. And I'll tell you why. Is because, it's not only the survivors you talk to, but you talk to priests, you talk to subject matter experts about it. And in almost 200 episodes, that's an incredible body of knowledge that people can go back to and listen to and reference at any time. I mean, it's historical, right? I get this from time to time. Hey, you're on the right side of this and you're making history. And that's why I think it's important to do shows like ours, because they're digital, they go online, and they're there forever. There's a lot of things on the internet I wish that, I didn't post, but these shows are a prime example of how to raise awareness. And without awareness, we don't have anything at all. So I salute you guys, and I thank you for that. Let's talk about Pennsylvania. So who are the cast of characters? And I know some of them. Shapiro, I spent some time with him in New Orleans. He's the attorney general, was the attorney general for the state of Pennsylvania, puts out this incredibly articulate, sophisticated report on the grand jury report in such a way that anybody could understand it. And it reverberated, and people started to finally get the picture. So there's Josh Shapiro, who is now the governor of Pennsylvania. My observation is, we have the support of a former AG and now the governor. Why is it so difficult to get statute of limitations reform passed in Pennsylvania?
Well, Richard, my first question is, and I'm very thankful that Shapiro produced the PA grand jury report. Absolutely no questions about it. But my question is, and if I'm wrong on this, set me straight also, but I haven't seen one thing done by the Attorney General's office. Not that I've seen, and if I'm wrong, I want to be corrected on this, but I haven't seen one chancery rated. I haven't seen one case come about. I haven't seen anybody held accountable. And in that grand jury report, there's thousands of instances of where, just for as an example, like my bishop knew this person was a problem. He had instances of grave immoral behavior. That's court documented, by the way. Right. And why wasn't he investigated? Why wasn't the University of Scranton investigated where this took place? Why weren't the people that surrounded him in this court case that we know of, just as one example, where's the investigation? So unfortunately, it looks to me, sitting in my shoes today, that Shapiro took the low-hanging fruit, and I'm so thankful that he did, and nothing else after that. Made this big splash, which once again, we're thankful of, but I haven't seen one thing done to help this matter and to get justice for survivors. I haven't.
So in his report of the grand jury investigation, powerful video, Google it. It'll also be down in the description for this video. He towards the end, he laments that as Attorney General, he's subject to the law, and the statute of limitation has precluded him from doing investigations on most of the cases. Now that he's governor, he has power and influence. He can't make the legislation, but he can tell all of them. I expect a statute of limitations reform bill from this session to be on my desk, and I'm ready to sign it. Have you seen any signs of that?
No, and
Can I take one step further there on that?
Sure.
To take it one step further, we know of information that is not under the statute of limitations that we know of for a fact that we know has been sent to the Attorney General's office and nothing has been done. So I know maybe the majority, you're right, maybe the majority fall under that. And yes, we would like to see him. Let's start changing the laws like you've done successfully in other places and other groups also have. But there's still plenty that could be done at that level, plenty. Enough to probably get chanceries raided, probably enough to get people locked up. If not, at least do something.
well, I think because with the statutes of limitation legislation, it did pass, but there's like, you need to have like, it's this big vote. And they, unfortunately, Governor Wolf's office dropped the ball. It was complete negligence that dropped the ball and pushed it back because it was supposed to be advertised. Just something, just a simple clerical thing that was supposed to happen, and they didn't. They dropped the ball. They were wrapped up in the 2020 election and in all the partisan garbage going on at the time, which is sad because this is an issue that transcends, normal politics. And in it, sexual abuse doesn't discriminate against, and only happen to Democrats or Republicans. It's something that happens to everybody. And everybody, is at risk for. So that was one of the problems in Pennsylvania. But apart from statute of limitations legislation, even if you have cases that are outside now of the statute of limitations time period for criminal, prosecution or civil suits, you still have, and I think they have they could investigate and really, hone in on the fact that you have a coordinated effort of the bishops of Pennsylvania, really the bishops of the whole entire United States, coordinated effort in the chanceries, coordinated effort with certain priests. I mean, I've been able to find this just looking at different cases in our diocese. You have a coordinated effort that it's like they're acting like the mob. I think they could easily do a RICO investigation and try to do a RICO lawsuit. And that could, I don't know that you have to have those crimes that they took a coordinated effort to continually conceal and hide. And it stretches way back, but it comes right here to present day. I don't know that you can't pursue something like that. And I think there's a lot there. And I'll give an example here in our diocese. There's a priest, and he may be innocent and wonderful. I don't think he is, but he might be. So I don't know. But there's a priest, Monsignor Bendick, and he's mentioned in the Al Liberatore court case. He was the one that was fined for lying. He shared a rectory, and he was in the rectory at one point with Father Gibson, a prolific pedophile, while he was a pedophile. Now, maybe he didn't know, but when there's another predator out by East Stroudsburg, and what do you know, Monsignor Bendick happens to be stationed out there at the time. Father Polish, who was the priest that our children served for, who was arrested in 2013, the first year of his ordination, he was quietly banned from seminary grounds in Dalton in the Diocese of Scranton because he was trolling seminarians. Of course, they kept him a priest, and guess who he served under that first year when he was banned? Monsignor Bendick. Monsignor Delaney, who just recently had an allegation, a credible allegation with an adult, but an adult that was, quote, vulnerable. Last summer, they had to remove him from ministry. He had problems in the past. And guess who they had him spend 6 months with after he came back from treatment? Monsignor Bendick. So it's like there's there's like this web, and honestly, it breaks my heart to say, but these bishops and these chanceries and these diocese are acting like La Cosa Nostra. And so I think that that is something that the Attorney General's office in the state of Pennsylvania could easily begin to investigate and unravel and get all the secret documents, because they have not given everything to the grand jury. They didn't. I know in my diocese they didn't. There's things that were left out of that report.
And they also
didn't.
They keep lying to survivors, and we've heard this multiple times, multiple survivors, where they'll promise them, yes, we'll show you your files, because I think it's it's definitely important to know what happened just to be able to move on. And they just lie, and they never get their files. They never get to see what happened. They never know the people that surrounded them and allowed that abuse to happen.
Yeah. I can tell you this, and I think you'd agree with me. What we have here, the problem is that in the Catholic Church, it is the institutionalized, systematic, wholesale rape of our children. And it's been going on, according to my research, it dates back to modern day Granada, Spain in 390 AD. So this notion that's been happening for the past couple of years, that's simply not true. This has been happening for almost 2 millennia. And you're right, it is organized, it is institutionalized. And it's, I get frustrated too. We have our, not a question, but a comment, Rico, which comes from Tina Naylor Riston, who's watching the live cast right now. She just simply comments Rico. And so a long time ago, I go back and I suggest that these are Rico cases. And what I got from legal scholars at Tulane and Loyola University is that the RICO was never designed for the churches. But when you look at the behavior, there's a clear pattern of abuse for almost 2,000 years. You're right when you say La Cosa Nostra, because the Catholic Church the mafia actually learns their trade craft from the Catholic Church. Something else I think to consider is that you never hear of a cartel or a mafia kid being molested, and the mafia and the cartel are 100% Catholic. You never hear of their kids being raped because they know the consequences. You can love the mafia, you can hate them, whatever. But the fact of the matter is, when somebody messes with their kids, justice comes swiftly. And they know that. And they won't touch a kid. So if you can't do a RICO case, what can you do? So currently there's an investigation, an FBI investigation going on about the cover-up of the church in New Orleans. That's still ongoing. It's a very, very active investigation. And what's contained in all the sealed documents is depositions, priests admitting that they rape children, which, is subject to statute of limitations, criminally speaking. It's subject to the statute of limitations, and there's really nothing we can do about that. In the short term, we can't do anything about it, but we can change laws on the civil side, changing SOL, eliminating statute of limitations on the criminal side is unconstitutional. So that's never going to change. But when you look at America as a whole, the criminal penalties and statute of limitations are pretty on spot. It's civil that where it needs to catch up on. But in those depositions, we're not subject to statute of limitations, because in many of the cases in these sealed depositions are priests admitting to taking children over state lines for the purpose of having sex with them. Now, you can prosecute under the Mann Act. And the Mann Act has no statute of limitations whatsoever. And it's, I hear from attorney generals. I worked with the attorney general in Virginia. I went up and did a speaker series for him. And he told me, you know, according to the law, he can't investigate institutions, businesses and institutions. And in Louisiana, the attorney general goes, well, he's more interested in prosecuting racehorse thieves than he is predators. But he'll also tell you the same thing, that the law precludes me from investigating the church.
There is something that I've looked into and I've been starting to try to move on. And it's not dealing with criminal cases or civil cases. But one thing it is, and if you have any listeners out there, is the idea of these educational institutions, the seminaries, the Catholic colleges, things like that. You know, they're accredited. And in a normal, you know, college, if you have a professor who keeps harassing and assaulting students, and you have people on the board who are aware of that, and it's allowed to continue to happen, that can factor into your accreditation. And if you don't get your accreditation, you don't get federal funds, you don't get all sorts of other things, and people don't want to go to your schools. And I know the Maritime Academy was found a couple years ago, they're like 5-7 years ago, to have fostered, they felt, it was an institutional problem, the harassment. And they were put on probation and had to put in all these safeguards and had to change their culture. So if, you know, if somebody was out there that was assaulted while in seminary, or knows of something like that, or knows, like, for instance, with the Cardinal McCarrick stuff that happened at Mount St. Mary's in Emmitsburg, Maryland. Well, you know, he's sleeping he's bed sharing with seminarians that are then going to that seminary. Donald Wuerl, Cardinal Wuerl at the time, is on the seminary board because he was the Archbishop of Pittsburgh. In 2006, he's made aware of the harassment and what's going on. There's a paper trail. He sends it to the papal nuncio. He's still on the seminary board. Cardinal McCarrick's still making visits because he's the, you know, cardinal now in Washington, D.C. Donald Wuerl is mum about it all. Like, why, you know, people need to file complaints with the accrediting agency of Mount St. Mary's. And if enough, like, I've already filed and tried to send something for the University of Scranton because my bishop was on the board of the University of Scranton while Al Liberatori was given a chair, and my bishop was one of the people who helped have him not be on the seminary grounds for his harassment. A kid at that school, University of Scranton, ended up getting sexually assaulted by Al Liberatori on the grounds of the school, University of Scranton, in his office. And, you know, my bishop, when he was put on the board, looks like didn't say a word, didn't share one concern about this guy getting the chair, which is what he's supposed to do as a trustee. And not only was a kid assaulted, but 2 other students there were harassed, suffered and had sexual harassment done to them by Al Liberatori. So I informed the accrediting board there. If enough people maybe step forward and keep filing complaints, you might not be able to do something criminally, you might not be able to do something civilly, but at the very least, let's pull the accreditations. Nobody else gets to act this way.
That's correct. We have a comment from Alice Crochet. She's an advocate. She says the way the church covers up and relocates priests that harm children is repulsive. Yes, it is. That's part of the playbook. So they get an accusation, they take the priest immediately and send them to another parish. They get more complaints, they send them to another parish. And then they get another complaint and they send them to a Catholic rehabilitation center in New Mexico for about a year, you know, nice retreat looking place. And then after that, they put him back into a parish and he reoffends again. And then at that point, they send him to Dominican Republic, South America, the Philippines. Uh, it's just part of the playbook. That's how they operate. They operate in multiple jurisdictions, so it becomes legally complicated for anyone to pursue this. Um, they'll tell you that nothing's going on, everything is good now, we're cleaning house, but they're secretly signing non-disclosure agreements with victims. They're giving them money and settling it, and they're not saying anything about those agreements.
Well,
And they go on TV and they say, who are these John Does? Who are these Jane Does? These great accusers? Why won't they name themselves? And that's when I got really mad. And I had taken all my audio tapes and my agreement and I leaked it to the press. And I said my own name because you won't call me John Doe. I'm Richard Windmann. I felt part of the cover up when I signed that agreement. I really did. And there's the cover up, and then there's the cover up of the cover up. And I don't know about your Catholic formation, guys, but mine was when I was a kid, if I ever told a lie, I was going straight to hell. Yet these leaders in the church got men of God, supposed to be pastoral in their demeanor and the way they respond to things. They're criminals, they're crooks, and they lie to our face, lie straight to our face every single day. So when we lose these younger generations of Catholics, I mean, kids aren't stupid. They see what's going on. They know what's going on. And I'll venture to say that any person under 30 years old that came from a Catholic family doesn't want to have anything to do with the Catholic religion. And isn't that a crime in and of itself?
Well, Richard, I think most Catholics are, fooling themselves to think that, because you hear all this evangelization, new evangelization. You hear all this, and they're fooling themselves to think we can go out and evangelize. Not that we shouldn't, but I can't evangelize without a warning, right? At best. I can't say, all right, come into the church. And I have to say, well, you know what? Stay away from this parish, stay away from that parish. You know what? This priest, don't mess with him. I mean, I have to do that, especially if I'm trying to share my faith with somebody that has children, God forbid. I have to have an evangelization with a warning, which is awful. But Catholics are fooling themselves to think that, and they haven't seen anything yet as far as church closing. So they're fooling themselves to think that we can go out there and evangelize without getting rid of, just for our, this podcast, without getting rid of the bad guys. You have to purge these guys from the church, period. And if you don't, this is just going to keep going on, because I also hear things, Richard, like, it's better now. They don't do this anymore. Well, our bishop keeps doing it to this day. I mean, just recently, I have video that I posted on YouTube that shows the music director organist for St. Nicholas Parish in Wilkes-Barre, right? I have this video of him going after or trying to solicit sex from a 15-year-old boy on, was it Tinder? I don't even remember the platform. Whatever. It was like one of those text platforms for
but it's
sex
right there on video
or hookups. I have this video and I have the text too. The guy that filmed it gave me all this stuff. So we put it out. We tell the authorities, and you're not going to believe, because this just pushes it way over the edge. And this is Bishop Joseph Bambera in the Diocese of Scranton. He still, to this day, has not told the parishioners why he removed Ed Locke as the organist and music director from St. Nicholas Parish in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. To this day, and we've written them letters, we've sent them we've got the video out on YouTube, we've told everybody we can possibly think of. He never told the parish why this predator, and he's a predator. If you watch this video, Richard, there is no doubt this guy is a predator, and he's very comfy in that. What do you do about that? And Catholics, they don't care. I'm sure nobody else has said anything but the bishop and us crazy folks here sitting in a basement in Northeast Pennsylvania.
Well, we're the problems. But and then the other part to this on the flip side is that really quick, they didn't, not only is the bishop not told the parishioners, but he was a teacher, a music teacher for 30 years in that same neighborhood at the high school. So there was no care or concern that there might be other people out there who have been solicited.
Mm-hmm. That's why I told the Jesuits when I came forward to them. I said, you know, just about every kid in my neighborhood was raped by Pete Modica and a Jesuit priest. I said, you know, I can go out and get these guys and send them to you. They're like, no, 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 don't do that. I'm like, why not? And they said, because, you know, Richard, some people just don't want to be found.
Mm.
It's so Tina says, a good point to file a complaint along with harassment and assault. It is also an abuse of power and position. It is an abuse of power and position. So what we've done in our organization is we take a multi-pronged approach to this. So in Louisiana, at the Archdiocese of Louisiana, the cover-up's obvious. The federal judicial system is also involved in it because they attend the St. Thomas More Mass. We got the attendee list, pictures of all of the judges that consistently rule in favor of the Catholic Church. We have that. We know that. Where else was I going with that? We've also multi-pronged approach again is the Archdiocese of New Orleans swindled FEMA out of 40-something million dollars to rebuild a middle school cafeteria. That must be a really nice cafeteria. So FEMA's like, hey, no, that's no, and the result of them taking the money from FEMA is FEMA fined them $1 million. Now, if that's not a penalty, that's not punitive, that's a business. If I can rip off FEMA to the tune of 40-something million dollars and only have to pay $1 million fine, that's a business. That's a business. And so we filed the complaint with the IRS. There's also an investigation going on into the IRS because FEMA just dropped it, settled it. But no, as a nonprofit, a 501c3, which they are, they cannot be involved in any type of criminal activity or any type of fraud. And so we take that approach too. So we filed that complaint. We filed a complaint with the FBI. You know, they're so hard to get to, and it's so hard to hold them accountable from a U.S. law perspective that we have no choice but to be diverse and creative in our approaches to hold them accountable. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, anybody that could turn the other cheek and cover up the facts behind and the people involved in abuse of children, I mean, that doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, why wouldn't they, if they're living a double life to begin with, let's say in that regard, you know, they can turn a blind eye to what's going on over here and still go pretend on Sundays and for sacraments and things like that. And so, I mean, why wouldn't they do something like that to continue their lifestyle or whatever's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, it's just corruption and crooked all around. I mean, it's dirty. It's perverse. It has nothing to do with the Catholic religion. And like you say, I get this all the time too. Richard, you're out to destroy the Catholic Church. No, I'm like you said earlier in the interview, I'm here to get the evil out of my church. You know, the numbers are declining in attendance and donations swiftly. The pews are empty. The church belongs to Jesus. It's his bride. That's indisputable. However, I don't mean to contradict Jesus on this, but if there are no souls in the pews, there is no church. And that's not the fault of survivors. That is the fault of leadership, the very corrupt, dirty, filthy leadership of the church. Any thoughts?
Kristen is great on this one. As far as if they think we can destroy this after what they've done, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. No, and I think also, I think you have certain bishops, if they themselves, let's say they aren't predators themselves, but they've enabled and covered up. You have certain of them and priests as well who have thought that they're protecting the church for years. We're protecting the church. I'm a loyal son of the church. And they're forgetting that St. Peter was told, you are Peter, upon this rock you will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. The Holy Spirit protects the church, always has, always will. But while all of us are here, Pope, bishop, priest, layperson, you name it, while all of us are here, we are supposed to be protecting children and innocent and vulnerable people. That's the job. Like if you're a shepherd, you don't abandon the sheep. You don't let them get torn apart. You don't let other shepherds tear them apart in your field.
Mhm.
You don't worry about, oh, is the grass going to grow next year or something like that. You're protecting your sheep. That's what you're called to do. And it's frankly arrogant to think that, I'm going to protect this church. I'm going to protect Holy Mother Church, the bride of Christ. No, that's scummy behavior to sit there and allow innocent, vulnerable people to be hurt, and then to turn around and lie to them and then put this debacle on their shoulders. It's a bunch of men who don't want to be real men and real shepherds, and who and they're cowards. They're absolutely cowards. There's no courage in protecting an institution. The heroes protect people, always have through history.
That is so well said. And on that note, we're going to go to our sponsor. Bose Corporation, Quiet Comfort Headphones. Really good headphones when they work. Back to the show. That was funny. Come on, guys. You're going to laugh.
One thing I'd like to go back to, if we could, for just a second, Richard, was you were talking about these non-disclosure agreements, and I think it's important to point out for the average Catholic or the average person that's maybe gets an interest in something like this, or maybe just still is at the point where, man, I just can't hear this yet, is why would they need non-disclosure agreements? If the bishop and the vicar general and the secretary and this on and on and on, if they didn't do anything wrong, because this doesn't happen anymore. It doesn't happen anymore. Mm-hmm. Everything's been cleaned up. So why would they need to do that? Why would they need a non-disclosure agreement? I mean, these are the shepherds of the church. They should, and if they're really looking, as they say in their media, they want justice for survivors. They really want to help a survivor, which we know is bunk. Mm-hmm. Why do you need a non-disclosure agreement? Just think of that logically. Like,
why would you ever need it in the Catholic Church?
Right.
Where's this in the catechism? Like the catechism is a whole thing about not gossiping, about not lying, it being a form of violence, about detraction, not telling people's weaknesses when it serves no purpose, but also the sin of omission, not saying things when you should, or the sin of commission. Like, why do you need a non-disclosure agreement ever in the Catholic Church?
Yeah, so this in the spirit of non-disclosure agreements, it's meant for things like when corporate entities want to work with one another. So you have Microsoft as a new print function, and HP printers as a new protocol. They sign non-disclosure agreements to protect their intellectual property if their partnership should fail. Yeah, that's a good example of a good intention of non-disclosure agreements. But non-disclosure confidentiality agreements with the church, it serves nobody but them. as a victim or survivor, or with the exception of me, you're not going to go out and hold a press conference and talk about your abuse. I mean, you feel shame, you feel guilt. If I had my druthers, I would have never said anything about it. But it's to protect them, not the survivors, not the survivors. In my mediation, they told me, here's a whole bunch of first off, I went to the church for spiritual guidance, for psychological services. And then like, nah, look, we're gonna give you a whole shitload of money and you're gonna sign this agreement. You're gonna shut the fuck up. You're gonna go away. And they told me in the mediation that without signing the NDA, there is no settlement. Doesn't sound like they're acting in my best interest. It seems like they're trying to protect themselves. Did a non-disclosure agreement, confidentiality agreement in that particular scenario doesn't serve the survivor at all, but it really goes a long way to try to protect the people who actually raped our children. That's my opinion. Your thoughts?
No, I feel that it's very similar to these secret files. And I know there's certain things that are personal information, especially the way the church handles bringing seminarians in, and which I don't agree with how they do that to begin with. I think it harms them right from the get-go and sets up this system to perpetuate itself. But very similar to that, like why do we need all these secrets if you're not doing anything wrong? I mean, everything financially, all the cover up. Like I want to and I still can't figure out, Richard, why I can't get this information. It doesn't make sense to me. We are people for decades now have funded this. It's not the bishop's money, right? He's been given this. He's the shepherd of it. He's overseeing it. He's not supposed to be the CEO, which he's a crappy CEO if that's what he thinks of himself anyway, because things are crumbling. But why can't I get this information? Why can't a survivor go to the chancery and say, hey, this guy abused me. This was his roommate. This was the secretary on staff. This was this. I want all the information surrounding that. I want to get it to my private investigator or the authorities, and I want to look at this myself. Why can't we do that? Why is the bishop the keeper of this, and I can't get my hands on it, or you can't get your hands on it? Doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
Well, I'll tell you why. So playing devil's advocate, Archbishop Amen, who is the devil, here's his response to that. There's no corporation, there's no institution in the United States that will simply hand over their personnel records to anybody who requests it. What do you say to that?
All right. Well, at the very least, we can start with every time all the information that the attorneys that work on behalf of the church have, black out and retract all the names of survivors for their privacy, but everything else, all those documents, make them out there in the public for all Catholics in that diocese, because there actually are attorneys. We pay for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So right there, we could start there. The other, but it goes even, because they all have this same little, oh, no other, nobody else has to give over documents. And they get into this idea, we want to protect privacy, and we don't want to, destroy the integrity of a person, and blah, 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 blah. But it's all garbage, because even when they say we're removing this person for a credible allegation, all they do is put it in the church bulletins for like 1 or 2 Sundays. They, if they really wanted to protect people and let them know, they'd have this up on bulletin boards. They'd have it on, they'd have it in the local newspapers. They'd have it all over the place, because there's a lot of people who've been harmed by the church that obviously don't go back to church and aren't going to see this, other victims. So they're very disingenuous. They don't want to get the word out. They don't want to do things like that. I think at this point, we've been doing this for, gosh, 4 years now. And, I used to give a lot of the benefit of the doubt, like, okay, you want privacy. You're trying not to destroy reputations. You're trying to operate in a way that's just. I'm going to start from that, perspective and move forward from that. What I think is honestly happening is a lot of this personnel files, a lot of these legal documents, a lot of the record keeping of red flags that they saw in seminary before the person goes into seminary, when they're out of seminary, all of that they keep. I think they keep their cards very close to their chest. And I'm no longer convinced that it's because you don't want to gossip or detract or destroy someone who perhaps could be innocent or just has some weaknesses. I think it's because it's their way to keep people in a vice grip and control them.
Excellent answer. Thank you so much for that. So here's a question I get all the time. I want to get your answer. So they'll say, Richard, in spite of what happened to you, being raped by priests, how do you still to this day keep your faith? What's the secret? How do you keep your faith? Knowing what you know.
I don't even know how to start that one right now. If anything, in my personal case, I think that this has driven me deeper into my faith. That probably doesn't make any sense, but because part of my reversion back to the church happened and was influenced by someone that he's a fighter. I don't know if you heard of Michael Voris, but
oh yeah, I work with him all the time. He's been on your show.
Right. You were on the documentary too. I apologize for that. I forgot.
All right.
We've been out of the game for a little bit here, but because maybe he's a fighter and he's very direct, and I got a good, fundamental understanding of the very brick and mortar of what the faith is. And that became very important to me. Seeing all this, I guess it didn't surprise me when you look into the history of what the human element has tried to destroy the church over and over and over again. As far as the evil goes that's going on, because it's just unbelievably evil what's happened. In my case, it's actually driven me a little deeper into my faith since we started this whole thing, which sounds a little counterintuitive if nothing else.
I think also what this has done is it's not how do I keep my faith or how have I kept my faith. I've had to continually ask myself, what really is my faith? And what am I believing in? And as a practicing Catholic, like, what am I really practicing and why? Certainly I grew up with some, a dysfunctional background, and I wasn't raised a Catholic. I converted, and I did come to the faith and the church, I think, looking for stability and a foundation. And I think the first part of, my adult life, it felt good to be a Catholic, felt kind of like you were in the triumphant, intellectual, exciting church. There were a lot of conversions happening, Scott Hahn, a lot of, big Protestants coming in. There were, youth conferences. It was the time of JP2. It felt very good to be a Catholic. I had to, over time, ask myself some real questions, though, about what is this? And if it's really about a relationship with Jesus Christ in the Eucharist and truly with him, then I need to listen to people who've been hurt and not see them as people challenging my faith, because integral to my faith is caring about people and having people who've been hurt matter.
Mm.
and people have been hurt in the church. So I feel like the faith I have today, it's not as triumphant. It doesn't feel as good all the time. I think it's far more authentic though.
Yeah, so Zipporah Michaud, she's an advocate as well. She said I had to get closer to God. I can tell you that my answer to the question is that faith isn't something bestowed upon me by an old white guy wearing a collar in a church. Faith is a gift from God. And by the grace of God, I never lost it. Never lost it. All right, one more sponsor, then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the future of the Angry Catholic Show. You ready?
All right.
A word from our sponsor. Android phones, because Apple sucks. Okay, back to the show. So tell us about what you're doing with the show right now. You guys have been on hiatus for a little bit, but you've been republishing some of your very best shows, which I find incredible. What's the future of the show? What are your plans? Where do you go from here?
Yeah, I wish it didn't take so long to edit these things, because right now we're just so crazy busy trying to, get some things on our end taken care of so we can get back to it. But we never, this, Richard, we never planned on doing this for a long time. Like, we literally, with our group of supporters, we were going to do this for 1 year or around that. And we were going to, in our night, being so naive, we literally thought we would just share this information, do a podcast, get it out there. People would be just outraged and run the bad guys out of town. We'd close up shop and move on with our lives, because we didn't plan on doing this for a long time. So 3.5 years later, we seemed like we were always playing catch up. We never had enough time to put, or at least in my opinion, to get ready for a show, to do the research we needed, to get the information to the right people. So we were always like playing catch up for 3.5 years. So we decided to take a little break, get some things taken care of on our personal end, and then re-engage and hopefully be able to spend more time and just maybe do it better. We're going to meet with our group, or people even have ideas. Like, I don't feel like we did a very good job because nobody's in jail right now. Nobody got investigated. We put out all this information, and honestly, most Catholics that I know, they could give a crap. They really could. They could care, not by their, speaking to them, but they haven't put any effort into this, right? I don't think they've shared it that much, although we had, we have plenty of response and we get emails and things like that. So just, I actually think my camera's falling down here, just so you know.
I think we've been successful in making people uncomfortable. We didn't want people comfortable with this.
Mhm.
It does seem right now, though, that they just seem to be uncomfortable with us. I don't know how uncomfortable they are with the information they're hearing and what's going on. We just seem to be the ones that make them uncomfortable. So I don't know, but we're gonna charge forward anyway.
Yeah,
That's a great message. And I'll make you a promise. If you guys don't stop, I won't.
all right.
You're on.
Pinky swear.
Deal,
Pinky
right?
Pinky swear.
Right.
Pinky swear.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, another thing that we're very naive about, I'm not sure, just with the massive problem, like just the cases that we were talking about, you figure that we know, or the video we got, or some guy got caught. That's got to be a small percentage of what's going on. Small percentage, just the stuff that we know, that we've been able to uncover. So the problem's massive. So honestly, I don't see us ever not pursuing this in some way. Maybe not the way we're doing it now, but I think what are we going to leave our kids? What are we going to leave our grandkids? Like, we owe it to them. And not to mention the survivors, they just haven't gotten justice. They're treated like dirt. It's just, it's awful.
No.
You know what, Richard? The other thing I know, I feel as a Catholic, and I wish, and it frustrates me, as you have other Catholics who Or like, I'm so faithful and this means everything to me. And this faith is the most important thing. And I want to evangelize. And I always think of this idea that, if you had someone in the middle of a jungle, you'd have missionaries, or we'd give money to missionaries to go cut through all the growth and everything to get to the person in the jungle, so the person can hear this gospel and have a relationship with Jesus. And I feel like what they don't understand today is the parish church Sunday mass itself is like this massive overgrowth in a jungle for so many people. They can't get there to hear the gospel and have a relationship with Jesus. And they can't get there because of all the overgrowth, because there's all the corruption and the insensitivity and the dismissiveness that's been shown to people who have survived this abuse that happened in the church. I sit often myself and think, like, could I, how hard would it be for me to be here on a Sunday in this dead parish who's basically acting like could care less what happened to you, move on, and people are just so dismissed. And so I feel like until that's cleaned out. So yeah, you need to clean out the bad guys. You need to clean out the bishops. But, a lot of work could just be done by people sitting in those pews, cleaning out your own heart and acknowledging that you haven't cared. You haven't cared, and you're not living it. You're not living it. You're not even close to living it, because you have a parish and you tolerate a parish that when someone's abused, it's really hard to walk in those doors. It's like, I don't know, people shouldn't have to endure mass, like white knuckle it through to get the sacraments. And I think we've allowed and helped to create that environment.
So you place some of the blame on laity, actually?
Oh yeah. Myself
Yeah.
was it's about 10 years ago. I really had to I remember sitting in mass, and I had just happened upon a blog called On My Knees by Michael Bauman. And he writes beautifully and authentically and honestly. And he was a survivor of sexual abuse in the Diocese of Scranton. And I happened upon it, and I started reading it. And I remember just sitting there one day in mass and thinking, like, we've treated people horribly. I so was willing to believe in 2002 that this was taken care of and the bishops are serious and these are good guys. And I hadn't cared. I really hadn't cared. I didn't want to care. I didn't want my little idea of Catholicism in my life changed. And I was part of that problem. I was. And I had to take a hard look at myself and say, and really repent and say, like you've acted like people don't matter. Like, who are you? I think I think a lot of us need to do that. Like, myself included. We've created a culture. We've done not, how many laity do you know that have stood up and stepped forward and, I don't know, tried to care and want to hear and help and make someone feel welcome and heard.
And this is one thing, Richard, we've talked about many times. At what point is it our fault as laity? At some point, if we allow these guys, we keep giving them money, we keep not challenging them on anything, we don't question them at all, and they're cowards, right? So they're not going to reach out. Like, our bishop has never to this day ever reached out to us, and we've tried multiple times for years. And this goes back before the Angry Catholic Show. This goes back 2011, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. We've reached out to him to meet with him, to share what he is such a coward that he will not even engage with us. And we're part of his flock, right? And in the beginning, we figured, and then, like I said, this goes back to 2011, like that far in the beginning, we just thought he was our bishop. Great. This guy's awesome, right? He's our bishop, newly ordained. Let's talk, we'll share what, I was just coming back into the church then, but what kind of person do you have to be as a shepherd of a flock to not want to engage that person. I think on once, if I was the bishop, and thank God I'm not, but if I was the bishop, the first thing I would do is get me in that office and want to build a relationship and talk to someone like me, right? I mean, we didn't set out to do this. We wanted nothing to do this. I would be happier than you could imagine if we could just close this down, shut our studio down, sell all the equipment, and move forward, right? Because the problem's solved. They keep telling us it's solved, but we know better than that.
We recently, gosh, I say recently, it's been over a year now. We sent an email to our bishop because the priest who our boys served for, who was a friend of our family, he was then arrested. But we came to find out that prior to his arrest, a couple of years before, at the parish that our boys were serving with a homeschool group, they had found a box of pictures of boys on his desk. Now, apparently, the pictures weren't sexual. They were just pictures of boys. And we'd like to know if our boys are in those pictures. I want to know if my son or sons is in that box. I'd like to know.
Yeah.
So we sent to our bishop to ask, sent to the communications director, and they were fishing for information. Like, what do you mean? They know what I mean. They know what I mean. It was handled. I gave names, all of that. They know what I mean. And But as a side note, the communications director is a father of a boy who's probably 9 now. And he's still the communications director. I was expecting after that email and that he had to be the bishop's guy doing all this. I thought, that maybe he would leave his job, because I certainly couldn't sit there and play interference like that for someone.
But it's not just that one either. Like these letters, Delaney, all the list goes on and on of communications that we've tried to reach out to the bishop and share information, or on our show or whatever. You think a guy that has a young child in the faith would say something or reach out or anything, but
wouldn't you take, bishop or no bishop, if that were me, I'd pull him aside and I'd want to know what's going on. I've got kids too. What is your problem?
Or at least
father.
Reach out to us and go, hey, where are you getting this information? Can you get it to me? And because maybe he thinks we're lying. Okay, I get it. Maybe he thinks none of this information we have is true. Well, wouldn't you think they would reach out to us? And it's just like their phony investigations they've done for years on different things that we know of, information that a professional investigator never got to. It just doesn't make sense.
But that's the Catholic laity. They're helping be part of the culture.
Before I forget about it, I want to get something across to survivors. It's very, very important. The victims assistance coordinator at the church is not acting in your best interest. What you tell them goes to the legal department. They're not going to settle with you. And if you ever bring them to court, they're going to use your own words against you. If you want to go forward and go public, or just to talk to someone to let them know what's going on, your first stop is the police department. Report it. It's a crime. Number 2, get yourself an attorney. And don't ever go to the church to try to resolve what happened to you, because it's the fox guarding the hen house. The people, the very same people who you think can help you are the ones that were responsible for raping you in the first place. And to get back to your point, you would think that if you dedicated your life to the church, you're a faithful Catholic, you tithe and everything, that they could give you 5 or 10 minutes of their time, right? That's not a very pastoral response. And that upsets me.
I just don't get it. Unless they're just hardcore criminals, liars, coward. Like that's the only reason I can see, because the things that we've talked about with different priests and on the show, it's like the only thing I can think of, Richard, is they can't engage us because they're gonna, they're gonna be on the hook. Then they're gonna go to jail. They're gonna expose their wrongdoings, so they can't engage us. So really what they're doing is going to continue, because our bishop cannot engage us, because he would then have to, like, he can't sit in front of us knowing what we know and play the games. He just can't.
They're serving the legal system. I mean, I think the reality that Catholics need to look at is your bishop is not the one in charge of your diocese at this moment. The bishops, at least in the United States, the majority of them have turned over their seat, their authority, their mission, their calling that they got from God over to their attorneys. And the attorneys are calling the shots. And the attorneys, so, so first, I mean, it's just an abomination. It's just an abomination that that's the case. And then second, we're paying for these attorneys.
Oh, yes, we are.
So again, I'd like all the documents then for the Diocese of Scranton, because they're really my attorneys.
That's a very, very good point. So guys, we're going to end it on that. Thank you so much for coming onto the show. It was long overdue. I wanted to thank you again for your grace and your hospitality when you invite me on the show. Also want to thank our viewers and our listeners who participated tonight, the questions, especially Tina and Alice and Zipporah. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. And is there anything else you want to say, parting?
Just thank you for what you're doing, because it does give us inspiration, and we've learned so much from not only the organization that you've now founded and are growing to help survivors, but it really helps Kristen and I to help us understand really what's going on, so we can kind of navigate this ourselves, because it's very tough to navigate where we're at in this whole mess.
I also want to thank survivors who have had the courage to come forward and share stories and share what's happened. This Catholic faith is still the most important thing in my life, and it changed my life. And this church is, I really do believe it's the true church, and I believe it's the church Jesus Christ founded. And if you look out through history, when it's had times of great evil and corruption, there's been people that God has lifted up to speak the truth and to reform the church and to do a lot of good. And I think history is going to look back and see that it's people who survived the sexual abuse in the church and came forward and had to continue in some ways to be abused again by the church, to the legal system, through all the garbage. But I just want to thank them for their courage, and you, Richard, for yours.
Thank you.
Because what you've done has not only helped you, you're helping, you really are changing the world, and we're all going to benefit from that. So thank you.
Those are very nice words. It's my duty, honor, and privilege. And I'm so proud to be associated with you guys, and I look forward to our future journeys as well. All right, guys, you have a good night, and thank you for being on the show.